Hello and welcome to Pro Modelers. This particular build we're doing here, we're going to be working on the 1/48 scale Hasegawa Phantom. Now we're going to do the J-type here. There's lots and lots and lots of aftermarket parts available for this. There's obviously weighted wheels, you can get FOD covers, obviously two mics do those. We've got here the resin nozzle set by Aries, which we'll have a closer look at in a moment. And this one here, there's lots also photo etch or PE parts as we call them for the Phantom as well. So if we have a quick look through the kit itself, the thing with the Phantom kit is there's lots and lots of different boxings of this particular kit. This particular one is obviously a reboxing of the original, so the instructions itself show it for Showtime 100. But obviously once you get going you'll notice them all, so don't worry about that. The instructions for the actual decals for this particular kit are in there. So that's those just like that. The parts themselves, we can pull this down, all still bagged here. Let me just open this up. They're all recessed panel lines. Depending on the Phantom type you get, if you get some of the other ones, they have raised at the back here for the tail planes, because what happened was some time ago Hasegawa changed their kit over for this particular one from raised panel lines, as perhaps you'll get with the B and the N series like that, have raised panel lines, where these have recessed. The formation lights as well, they're sort of an afterthought onto here, but obviously if you're doing the J type then obviously you'll be removing them. They're really for the S, because the S and the J are extremely similar. The kit itself, as I say, it's a very nice kit. I've done quite a few of these, so I'm quite familiar with it. The only sort of thing we're going to have to watch when we do it is the actual air intakes, the way they fit on. There's a little trick to do that which I'll show you about. There's a tiny little mark on the part, so we can go through that. But that's what we're going to do. We'll work through that and get it done. The nozzle set is the only thing we're going to be replacing, because the one that comes with the kit is okay, but it's a little bit crude. So if we just open up this one, we can show you. Let me just pop this one out. This is the Aries set, which is a lovely little set. Let me just hop this out. So obviously you get a nice deep engine cans like this. The actual feathering and the bits and pieces around the nozzle is particularly nice as well. As you can see in that shot there, it is very, very nicely done, very nicely detailed. And then we should get in here a little bit of photo etch as well for the back area as well, so that's very nice, so we can get those done. The photo etch parts themselves that we've got, the kit, which is here. If we just open this up, we can show you what we get. So we've got colour ones really for the cockpit. We try not to catch this in the light too much. We've got colour ones for the cockpits, for obviously the instrument displays and the areas like that. And there's another fret there full of them, which is quite nice. Then also we should have in here we are, which is the big one. Now this is going to be for the external areas on there. Obviously some detailing, a lot of it is around the cockpit, but also we've got missile rails, certainly some intakes and various things like that, and some new fences as well, which is quite important because the kit ones are quite thick, so it takes care of those. So this particular set is an all-round over it. Obviously you've got in here areas for wheel wells just as well, which is quite nice. Then also we should have in here as well is the instructions. There we go, and this will show, and obviously we'll work through this and I'll talk you through it about how we're going to do it and taking it off, and we'll pay a particular bit of attention around to using it on the cockpit section certainly. But they're very nicely laid out, as you imagine. If you've ever used their parts before, sometimes it can be quite fiddly to get them on, so we'll take our time and work the way through it. Basically we're going to be modelling ourselves onto one leg that we've got here already. This is the S type that I did some time ago, which is on the site. You can find it on the site under photo builds, or if you're on the DVD, obviously we'll have it on with the DVD as well. So it'll be quite similar to this, but obviously without the wings folded up. Okay, so we've got the Phantom out of the box. What we've actually done is remove it off of the sprues for these areas, and there's a few little things we need to take care of. Now, depending on the type of Phantom you're doing, we've got these moulded in. If we bring you in a little bit, you can see that you've got these moulded in formation lights. Now, the ones on the side tend to be a bit funny because they lean backwards. Now, if you're doing an S version, then you'll need this particular seam on there, you want to leave that alone unless you're going to come with photo etch and perhaps replace those areas with photo etch parts. But they're pretty nicely done, they're into scale and all the rest of it like that. But if you're not, you're going to need to remove them. Now obviously there's lots of ways to remove it. I just do it the standard, the fastest way. I take not a very coarse file because we don't want to scratch the paint, and literally sand it off. Everything's recessed, and what we can do, we can just pop round there and put all the other bits back in. So we just lightly, we're going to sand this because it's raised detail away. And as I say, it's not a massive job to take these out because they're not hugely sticking up. So we'll just lightly sand it away, and then what we'll do, we'll just pop back and we'll rescribe. So I'll just take that one off, literally the same. The one on the tail, that will go as well. As I say, keeping it nice and flat, and because it's a nice flat and easy area to do, we can literally just rescribe these back in, and any riveting we can do is easier. But in some ways it's easier just to take it completely off, and then basically we'll polish it up and everything to make it like new again, than it is to try and, if you try and sort of mask up and remove it and things like that, you tend to sort of make a little bit more work. It's easier to do a nice big area and then flatten it down. And the same with the one on the front here, we're just literally going to sand these off. Okay, so once you've got it basically off, and it's going to be one of those hard ones to see, I feel, but there we go, we've got this, focus in, there we go. As you can see, it's pretty rough and pretty scraped. So what we've actually got, we use quite a coarse sanding stick for that. If you've got the 3 set that I use, the Pro Modelers ones, then I use obviously the coarsest one first, then we're just coming in here with the second one, which is a lot finer, and then obviously double-sided. I wet it a little bit to give it that sort of wet and dry effect. Okay, and we just do sort of circular motions, and what we're really doing now is polishing out the scratches that are made a little bit too heavy. So we just pull it out a little bit. We can do the same on the tail. As you can probably see, catch it in the light, it's very scraped, very scratched. So obviously with the finer one, we can literally just taking out the scratches, and then in a minute we use a very fine a Miracle Finish sanding sponge. Just taking out the tail, then we've also got the one around the nose. Just like so, and then come along, got a finishing one, which is a Miracle one, where if you get one of these, another way to do it is go to your local sort of beauty boutique, or sort of, your chemist, things like that, and you can pick it up. It's called a Miracle sanding sponge. It's designed really for buffing nails, but it's great for this because what it will do is polish out all the scratches as it would on your nails if you're using it on your nails, but with a little bit of work we can go around. And if you wet it, it just acts a little bit like wet and dry, and it polishes a little bit better. And this is the one that I finished up already. This one's all done, and it's totally got rid of those without any need for filler and bits and pieces like that, which is the problem. But this rear one's completely gone, and it's quite a nice shiny finish, and they're all gone just like that. Now what we need to do is literally just to pop the panel lines back in. So if you use a P cutter and a scribing template, what you can do is quite easy because they're on nice flat surfaces. If you're quite happy to let it do the work, if you put your P cutter in the groove and literally just drag it backwards, as long as it stays in the line, you're okay. If you're not very confident about it staying in the line, then obviously you can come along, put your template or your guide onto where you want to go. Okay, and then just drag it along and just pop in a new panel line in, which in some ways is quite nice to do because they will be a little bit shallower than the others. So we can just do these, just pop these back in. And then riveting, you've got 2 options. You just do these ones here. You can either come along with a needle. I grab one here. Got a large sewing needle, and literally where you've got a white dot, you can re-put the needle in and literally just pop it in just like so, which is probably the quickest and easiest way to do it, knowing that you've got them exactly where they were before, so they will all match up. The other way, of course, is to use a riveting wheel. Obviously you get different gauges, you can pop it on and roll it across, but in this case, to be honest, there isn't many here, and what I can do, I can literally just pop along and squash them. You don't want to over squash them, because what happens is you'll make a little crater and the sides will lift up, but we can just go along and touch all these in all the way along, and then we'll be back really to sort of square one, if you like, of where we want to be, which is to basically have it all set and all ready for when we do come along and do our washes. The other way, if you've got a little bit of build up in the panel lines, obviously what we've been doing, if you just place a pin in there and drag it down, you can clean them out quite easily, just like that. So we just do those and clean those out. Okay, working with photo etch parts can be a little bit daunting if you're not used to them. Two things to remember with them. One is to keep them flat at all times, because obviously if you get any types of curves and bends with them, they don't like to sort of stick to the surfaces they're going onto. Secondly is to know where they're going to go first, and test fit them as if you would as if it was a plastic part. Don't assume they're just going to fit in, because sometimes you get little areas and then when you try and push them in, they bend and give you little bits of problems. If you're going to use an Edard set, which I suppose is the most well known, what you actually get, we've got a colour fret here for the Phantom, 2 colour frets, and then you have your obviously your instructions, and in here as well we've got a standard sort of finish one. Usually got your cardboards in between, and in here somewhere there's a piece of acetate or like photo film for the clear parts, and this will be for your heads-up display. So at all times just try and keep them flat. Have a good look at your instructions and see roughly if you're going to use all of the parts, or perhaps you'll just use some of them in different areas, where they're going to go and things like that. Now when you're using photo etch, usually 9 times out of 10 you're going to have to do some removal of certain raised detail that is on the parts and things like that, and on this particular case it's no different. If you're using the Edard set, what we've actually got here, anything in the tan colour on the instructions, is areas where it has to be totally removed and put flat, because obviously you're going to replace them with the photo etch parts. Now usually the photo etch parts on something like an instrument panel are multi-layered, whereas obviously you have a backing part goes down first, which will have the back of the dials. In this case it'll be this one here, so it's just a black piece with the dial, so obviously it's got all the printed detail. Sometimes they're on a piece of acetate, the film, if you can get hold of it, if it flies around. The easiest way to do that is to paint the back half white, so the instruments and the dials all show white through, and that's the type of effect you're after. If you're going for a full colour set like this one is, obviously it's all pre-printed, and then obviously once the back one's on and dry, you can come along and place the top one. When I'm using photo etch, a lot of people tend to use super glue or a cryo, a CA glue with probably a slower setting time. It's a little bit thicker. I tend to prefer to use something like gator glue. It's basically a very strong version of PVA glue or white glue you might have had as a kid. That way you can place this on and you can maneuver it around quite a long time and then it's set. Also the great thing about it is if you have got too much and it shows through, you can literally just wet a cotton bud or a Q-tip and wipe it off and away you go. So have a look through your instructions, as I say, see what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, where you are going to use it and so on. For this particular sort of demonstration we're going to do here, what we'll have is we'll do the cockpit area. So what we need to do, as it shows down here, we need to remove all of this raised detail. Now easiest way to do that is come in with quite a coarse file to start with, or a sanding stick, okay, and just sand it all off until you're totally flat, which probably won't take that much work. If you start with a coarse one, and then obviously what we'll do is we'll come back with a finer grit to sort of polish it all off nicely. But it's got to be flat and level, just like the others. So if we just do the front ones here as well, and obviously, you know, most instrument panels they do sort of bend slightly inward. There is a canter to them, so obviously you need to sand it that way as well. Don't make them totally flash. Obviously these front ones, they do lean inwards. Okay, so we have all the surface detail taken off of the tub here, and all we've actually done now is basically put in the bulkheads, the rear one, the front one. We've put the rudder pedals in and the control stick. It's just because it's easier to paint up and do. And then we can do actually the grip and do a little bit of things with that. I'll show you in a minute. So that's basically in. We've removed the surface detail where we've been told, so we've taken the small little square things off of the side there. We've removed as best we can the detail off of the instrument panels, but obviously getting in there is a bit tricky. So what I've done, I've literally just flattened it off so it's good enough so we can get in there. Now the thing is, all US military sort of hardware from around about sort of mid 1960s, they all seem to turn over from going sort of the blacks and the silvers, interior cockpit colours, to dark sea grey. Now, a great match for this is XF54 on Tamiya. So if we give this a good old shake, what we can do, we can spray up the actual insides of the fuselage cockpit hard, the tub itself, the instrument panels, and the side plates, so they're all sprayed up. So the photo etch, when that goes in, will just stick straight onto it and the job is done then. We don't have to do any more spraying and painting to it. So the thing is, we want to give this a good old mix, give it a good old shake to get that going, because it's a new bottle, to be honest. Now what we've done, we've got a few little parts that can go on this which need to be sprayed at the same time, because obviously not everything has been coloured. So check your references, have a look at the parts that are not, and usually what it is, we've got some interior detail that's going to go on the inside, the side walls of the instrument panels. So the easiest way I find to get these off, there's two ways you can do this. You can stick this down, but then obviously with the colour you want to be careful that it doesn't sort of peel off when you're doing it. Put a little bit of blue tack, but for actually getting it off the sprues, the best thing I found to do it is to use your scissors. The ones that I use, or if you can, a nice pair of scissors, because the thing is, if you use a knife and you're using it on a cutting mat, it tends to bend in. So if you are going to use a knife, use it on a hard surface. So what we've got to do, we've got to find these side wall bits, and so that's number 16, 15 and 16. So all you do, you go along and we're just going to snip. They're fairly easy to come off the frets, but say try and keep it as flat as possibly can. So you want to use the tips of your scissors to just literally nip them off. So what we do, we just pop in the undersides here, bit of a nip. And there's one. And what I tend to do is I tend to keep a piece of kitchen roll handy and keep all the photo etch in it. Otherwise, if it gets on your cutting mat, it tends to get swiped off. Perhaps a sleeve might catch it or something like that and drag it off. And when it gets on the floor, it gets extremely hard to find it. So we've got those on, and then number 38, which I do believe is down on these, which are the side panels as well. So let's just have a quick check for it. 38, that's the other thing, is trying to find these. They do tend to be in somewhat of an order. Perhaps it's not on that one. Here we go, it's down here, and that one's coloured, so we don't have to worry about that one. Obviously we've got rudder pedals, ones you can put on side, but they're going to be deep down in the cockpit and you're not going to really see those, unfortunately. So that's about it. So what we're going to do, we'll take our gator glue, as we're going to use, okay, and a cocktail stick. You could use a brush, because obviously it just washes off with water. We've got a little bit on the side. Have a look at roughly where you're going to place it. It doesn't have to be, you know, completely spot on. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to pop it, a bit of glue down on the inside, then making sure you've got your left and rights around the right way. What we can actually do, you can come along and just drop it on as you like, and then just push it into fit. Now there's a little step down the bottom where the seat fits on with this. It's one of those ones, because it's such a small area, it's quite hard to see it, but there's a little step going on just down in here. So what we need to do, we need to manoeuvre this back. This is where your tweezers come in quite handy. If I just push it in, you can see. We can push that nicely into place. Okay, then what we can do with a cotton bud, if you have got any excess, like down in here, this is the area we're talking about there, you can just wipe it off with a cotton bud, hopefully like that, not catching the part you're after. You could just say use super glue for these types of things, but to be honest, super glue does have a habit of you know, sort of pushing out the sides, and then it sticks and wrong bits get caught up with in the process and things. So I do like to use a PVA type glue, like gator glue. I find it's very nice. It dries totally clear, and quite hard. It's almost hard, as with all PVA glues. You know, don't believe it when you hear about it. They'll say it's like it dries rock hard and totally sandable, because that's not quite the case. They do tend to rub off a little bit. But we've got those bits now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to finish off putting the parts in, and then we can spray the cockpit. Okay, so we've got our XF54. We've got those little parts just all stuck in there. So what we do, we're going to use this neat, going to spray it neat, straight from the bottle, high air pressure, about 30 psi. There's a good reason for this. One, it dries extremely quickly and we can work on it. Secondly, it gives you a bit more of a texture to the paintwork. So what we're going to do, we're just going to spray the inside cockpit walls, remembering to get them from all angles. And what we can do is come along with some dry brushing. So there we go, we've just done that one. Same with the other side. Like so, we just turn the old compressor on, we're running out of air. Instrument panels, obviously the front's going to be grey, so we do the sides and the backs and everything. And what we'll do with this one, we'll add a little bit of wiring on the build for that anyway. Same with the tub itself. We've got the sides. And the instrument panel. So we just spray those like that. We'll just tip that back in now. Goes in like that. And then back on there. Okay, so we just clean up the airbrush and let those dry a minute. Okay, so now we get going with the fun part, if you like. So what we've got our gator glue. We've got our parts. Now what we'll do, we'll start on the main instrument panel. Now obviously for the first one that goes on here is the black one, which is the underside one, if you like. So what we'll do, we'll just get some bit of glue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a cotton bud stick and use the plastic off it because it'll hold a little bit more. Okay, so what we'll do, we're just going to give quite a generous amount because we want this to properly stick down. Then obviously once we're all everywhere, we can wipe out any excess we don't want at all. So let's put that in there. So then we've got our first bit. Wet finger always works well with this. And we're just going to come up and we're just going to place it right where we want it. Just down in there and make sure it sits in. Okay, now we're not really worried about rubbing off the excess of it yet, to be honest, because what's going to happen is we've got another one to go over the top. So we've got our next part, which is the one below. So we just come back with some more glue. You could let that dry for a moment, okay, and because this is going to clear totally dry, we're going to put this right the way over the old one, the underside one even. Okay, so just make sure it's pretty even and it's right to the edges. It's important to get to the edges, otherwise you end up with a lifting area. Okay, so we'll just come in with the next one. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just going to slide this one in. Okay, that's it. And then we're going to come along with a dry cotton bud. Okay, and we're just going to wipe away the excess that comes out the top. Now the ones which are coming through the dials I'm not really worried about. It's just that we need to squash out anything that's really pushing up and not letting it sit down too well. And there we go, that one's on. So if we zoom you right in, you can see what we've got there. So there it is, that one's on, just like that, which is a nice quick way of doing it. It saves a lot of painting and detailing, as you can imagine. So what you want to do now is let that dry, and then obviously we're going to come along, we can put the ones on the sides, there's one at the top and another one to go on the bottom. We could possibly get the one in the bottom on there now, so I can show you close up. So there we go, generous amount right over the top, and then we'll just come along with this dial, drop it on, And once it's on there like that, we can just push it down. Now if this was super glue, so what I was saying, you couldn't move this, but because it's PVA, we're quite happy to let that maneuver, and we can push and adjust and make tiny little adjustments to it. But there we go, that's one on like that. So that's how we do that. And then certainly we'll let that to one side just to dry. It won't take as long as you might think. PVA glue does have a habit of taking a long time to dry, but you know, if you've squashed most of it out, it really shouldn't take that amount of time. So what we're going to do now is come down and do the sides. So same thing, generous amounts, just like that. We'll spread them to the sides. And so I know I say about the sides, but many a time when I've had them and they haven't stuck properly, it's because they haven't been stuck on to the sides. Okay, so we just lift that one up. It's really important to try and keep them as flat as possible, because if you bend them, if you were using CA glue or a super glue for instance, you could literally just stick them down, hold them, and they would stick there in place. But obviously because we're using PVA, it would want to naturally run out. So we're going to squash it to get the edges out, and then we're just going to run cotton bud down the sides, make sure we're all happy. Wet the cotton bud, and that will literally just help it wipe away any excesses that are too much. And there we go, that's that one in. It's that one in just like that. So we do a close up for the other one. So we just come along here, drop it down roughly, and then position it in, make sure it's tucked back, lined up. Okay, and then we're just going to give it a bit of a squash and let it ooze out from everywhere, and then we'll just wipe that away. And say a wet Q-tip works a lot better than a dry one. Okay, just like so. Quite happy with that one's in, just like that. Okay, so we'll let that dry, and then we can carry on adding the others, but that's the basics to putting in parts like that. And in a moment I'll show you about bending the actual parts to fit them in.